During a landmark public address delivered outside Marlborough House on the morning of February 18, 2026, Princess and formally confirmed that the British royal family has been actively and directly cooperating with the United States Internal Revenue Service in its ongoing investigation into the Archewell Foundation, an organization operated by Meghan Markle but legally registered under Prince Harry's name. Standing at a marble lectern, flanked by cameras and senior palace aides, and delivered her statement with her characteristic firmness and clarity. There must be no ambiguity when the integrity of the crown is brought into question, she declared. Her Majesty's household has fully cooperated with all inquiries initiated by U.S. tax authorities concerning the Archewell Foundation. The institution I represent remains steadfast in its commitment to transparency, constitutional responsibility, and ethical neutrality. The moment carried historic weight, not because the royal family had never faced scandal, but because this time an external government authority was investigating potential international tax improprieties connected to the former Royal Sussex household. By choosing to speak personally and on behalf of the Royal Trust, and underscored both the seriousness of the issue and the Crown's determination to distance itself from Archewell's declining credibility. Confidential diplomatic memos leaked to the Financial Times and later confirmed by Whitehall officials revealed that on February 9, the U.S. IRS submitted a formal request seeking clarification on whether the Archewell Foundation had ever received institutional or symbolic endorsement from the British monarchy. This inquiry was prompted in part by several public remarks made by Meghan Markle, most notably her statement on September 21, 2023, at the Aspen Impact Forum. Archewell represents not just our family, but a legacy of service that the Crown instilled in us. IRS officials reportedly flagged the comment as potentially misleading, arguing that it may have created the impression among donors and media that Archewell operated under the moral and institutional umbrella of the British royal family. Combined with irregular financial patterns in Archewell's 2024 tax disclosures, the remark triggered an accelerated audit, accompanied by a cross-border inquiry to verify that the palace had no undisclosed involvement. By February 12, the IRS formally requested a meeting with representatives of the Royal Trust to address three key questions. Had the Crown, at any time, directly or indirectly, supported Archewell's operations, financially or symbolically? Were royal insignia, language, or personal titles, such as Duchess of Sussex, used in commercial ventures without explicit authorization? Was there evidence suggesting Archewell had been used to project an illusion of royal endorsement for personal or political fundraising? Sir George Lelles, chair of the Royal Trust, responded without delay. On February 14, a confidential video conference was convened between the IRS Forensic Compliance Team and senior British institutional officials. Sources within HM Treasury confirmed that British representatives submitted internal documentation demonstrating the following: no royal grants, sovereign funds, stipends, or charitable endowments had ever been allocated to Archewell. The palace had issued no endorsement letters, provided no diplomatic backing, and authorized no insignia connected to Archewell or Meghan's lifestyle brand. As early as May 2024, the Royal Communications Office had logged 2 internal warnings regarding the misuse of royal-adjacent imagery in Meghan's commercial materials. According to sources familiar with the session, the tone was direct yet measured. U.S. officials were said to be both reassured and surprised by the speed and clarity of the British response. 2 days later, on February 16, Princess and held a private meeting at Clarence House with Peter Howard, Senior Director for International Tax Crimes at the IRS. The closed-door session lasted 1 hour and 45 minutes. Though the full transcript remains sealed, palace officials informed The Telegraph that the discussion included a detailed examination of Meghan Markle's public statements and fundraising events involving royal symbolism, clarification regarding the use of Sussex titles in American tax filings and promotional materials, a review of royal protocols governing brand licensing, coat of arms usage, and commercial boundaries following royal exit, an outline of the palace's internal ethics framework for distancing former royals engaged in monetized representation. Following the meeting, Howard circulated an internal memorandum commending the candor and cooperation of the British delegation. In an off-the-record remark to the Washington Post, a senior IRS official stated, "We have rarely encountered this degree of institutional transparency in cross-border investigations. The royal household provided what was requested without obstruction or deflection. This marked the first occasion since Prince Andrew's 2022 civil settlement that a senior royal had publicly addressed legal matters under external scrutiny. Yet unlike that case, handled discreetly through legal channels, Anne's statement functioned as a constitutional declaration. She invoked both royal dignity and the ethics of public service, drawing a deliberate contrast between the palace's conduct and the alleged irregularities surrounding Archewell. It was also significant that Anne selected February 18, the same date Archewell filed a new quarterly compliance report with California's Charity Registry, attempting to retroactively amend its organizational structure. Let the record show, and concluded near the close of her address, that the monarchy will not extend even the faintest shadow of legitimacy to any enterprise that confuses personal ambition with the public good. As British institutions continue confronting the complexities of a modern monarchy, one required to balance visibility with restraint, symbolism with legal responsibility, Princess Anne's statement may ultimately be remembered as a defining turning point, a senior royal choosing leadership over silence rather than retreating behind tradition. While her declaration firmly established the royal family's disassociation from Archewell, the deeper issue now lies in the financial realities underpinning the foundation and the explosive findings driving the ongoing IRS investigation. According to internal IRS documents obtained by the Financial Ledger, the Archewell Foundation has been flagged for multiple financial red indicators over the past 2 years. These warning signs, largely overlooked by the California Attorney General's charitable registry, until recently, were reactivated when the IRS began scrutinizing Archewell's mid-2025 transition to a fiscal sponsorship model, a structure that permits nonprofits to function under another entity's tax-exempt status. This restructuring followed Archewell's failure to submit full tax disclosures for fiscal years 2022 and 2023, prompting suspicions of intentional evasion. Partial 2024 filings, released under U.S. charitable compliance requirements, revealed the following figures: total donations received, $2.1 million, down from $5.3 million in 2023, total reported expenditures, $5.1 million, actual grants distributed to external charities, $125,000 salaries paid to 2 staff members, $913,000 administrative, travel, and security costs, $2.9 million. In simple terms, more than 75% of Archewell's expenditures were not allocated directly toward charitable programming. Even more concerning, sources indicate that a significant share of those administrative costs appear connected to Meghan and Harry's personal security arrangements, luxury travel, and promotional efforts tied to their commercial ventures. The $913,000 salary figure was what initially triggered deeper IRS scrutiny. Archewell's 2024 staffing disclosure lists only 2 full-time employees, neither possessing senior executive backgrounds in nonprofit management. IRS auditors reportedly described the compensation as grossly disproportionate, comparable to executive pay structures at major global charities serving tens of thousands of beneficiaries. We're examining a foundation with a minimal operational footprint, yet its expense model resembles that of an international relief agency, said one source familiar with the audit. Simultaneously, a secondary investigation was launched into Meghan Markle's luxury lifestyle brand As Ever. Introduced in April 2024 and initially promoted as a values-driven enterprise, the brand debuted with limited edition fruit preserves, botanical candles, herbal teas, and artisanal home decor. At the time, royal observers noted that the packaging bore a striking resemblance to traditional British royal gift aesthetics, including a stylized crown motif and a signature serif font long associated with palace correspondence. More troubling were allegations of manufactured scarcity. During its launch weekend, As Ever announced that inventory had sold out within hours, prompting glowing features in Harper's Bazaar and InStyle and reinforcing Meghan's emerging image as a lifestyle entrepreneur. However, in late January 2026, forensic tech investigators on Reddit uncovered a coding flaw within the brand's e-commerce platform that exposed real warehouse inventory levels: 37,455 fruit spread gift boxes, 62,000 signature candles, 80,000 floral sprinkle units, 39,000 peppermint tea packages, large quantities of orange marmalade, and related preserves. Altogether, the IRS estimates that more than $23 million in unsold inventory remained in storage, with certain perishable products set to expire as early as April 2026. During one monitored 4-hour window in January, only 26 items were purchased. Market analysts later labeled it one of the most significant luxury overstock miscalculations in recent memory. Perhaps the most consequential development was Archewell's quiet June 2025 shift into a fiscal sponsorship arrangement under an undisclosed Los Angeles-based 501c3 umbrella organization. While such structures are common among early-stage nonprofits, they become far more contentious when applied to a high-profile foundation associated, symbolically, with royalty. The arrangement allowed Archewell to continue fundraising without directly filing its own independent financial disclosures. In its January 2026 summary report, the IRS stated, "This restructuring appears strategically timed to limit scrutiny precisely when public concern began escalating regarding financial inconsistencies and symbolic misrepresentation." Critics argue that transparency diminished at the very moment accountability was most essential. Public opinion within Britain has shifted sharply. The Guardian published the headline, "Royal Echo, Commercial Collapse, How Archewell Burned Through $5 Million in a Year." The Times followed with, "From Crown to Chaos, the Markle Foundation's numbers don't add up." Across the Atlantic, the Wall Street Journal raised constitutional questions about whether a foreign national leveraging symbols of a foreign monarchy, the British Crown, to solicit domestic charitable funds might violate IRS integrity statutes. On the morning of February 16, 2026, a discreet black diplomatic vehicle entered the rear courtyard of Clarence House. Inside sat Peter Howard, Senior Director for International Tax Crimes at the IRS, accompanied by 2 federal legal observers and a liaison from the U.S. Embassy in London. Awaiting them, composed and methodical with briefing documents prepared, stood Princess and alongside members of the Royal Trust's Compliance Division. This was no ceremonial engagement, it was a working summit designed to conclusively establish the legal and symbolic separation between the monarchy and both the Archewell Foundation and Meghan Markle's as ever enterprise. The closed-door session extended for 1 hour and 45 minutes. During that time, Princess Anne personally addressed 6 categories of concerns that had been submitted in advance by the IRS. Agenda of the closed-door summit: use of royal titles in tax documentation. Meghan's use of the title Duchess of Sussex within U.S. tax filings was never authorized by the Crown for either commercial or charitable purposes. Its inclusion, officials argued, implied royal endorsement in fundraising contexts. The palace specifically referenced Meghan's September 21, 2023 speech at the Aspen Impact Forum, describing it as both misleading and unauthorized. Licensing of royal symbols and branding. Princess Anne's team presented internal cease and desist memoranda issued in May and again in September 2024, aimed at preventing the continued use of royal-adjacent imagery and branding elements. Historical funding connections. The Royal Trust formally affirmed that no grants, subsidies, or financial allocations had ever been directed toward Archewell or any of its subsidiaries. Diplomatic misrepresentation. Palace representatives categorically denied any knowledge of claims allegedly made to donors suggesting that Archewell operated under the guidance of royal traditions or palace council. Communications record. Emails, memoranda, and communications spanning 2021 through 2025 demonstrated repeated internal efforts to prevent reputational overlap and contain public confusion between the monarchy and the foundation. According to sources inside Clarence House, Anne's demeanor throughout the summit was composed yet unyielding. Her posture conveyed neither anger nor frustration, but rather a firm constitutional clarity. At one notable moment, when Howard asked whether the royal family believed Archewell's operations posed reputational harm to the institution, Anne responded without hesitation, "The harm is not theoretical. It is institutional, and we are addressing it accordingly." Observers described a powerful symbolic gesture during the session, and placed Archewell's 2024 expenditure report beside a framed photograph of Queen Elizabeth II taken during her 1957 Christmas broadcast, the speech in which the late monarch declared, "It has always been easy to hate and destroy. To build and to cherish is much more difficult." The juxtaposition, subtle yet deliberate, underscored a central message: public trust remains the monarchy's most delicate and irreplaceable asset. The venue itself, Clarence House, was intentionally selected. Traditionally associated with the Queen Mother, and now linked to and's constitutional stewardship, it has increasingly served as the palace's preferred setting for high-level mediation absent pageantry. Choosing it over Buckingham Palace or Sandringham signaled gravity without spectacle. As one royal household member described it, this was a matter of state ethics, not royal drama. Within hours of the summit's conclusion, the IRS released an official statement to media outlets in both the United States and the United Kingdom. The Internal Revenue Service acknowledges with appreciation the full cooperation of the British royal household and the Royal Trust in clarifying the institution's non-affiliation with the Archewell Foundation. We extend particular thanks to Her Royal Highness, Princess, and for her candor and constitutional leadership throughout this process. Analysts interpreted the statement as a clear indication that further enforcement action would now focus squarely on Archewell and its US-based operators, without risk of diplomatic entanglement involving the monarchy. Inside the palace, senior courtiers acted swiftly following the Clarence House meeting to revise the Royal Branding Compliance Charter, an internal framework regulating the post-use of royal titles, insignia, and ceremonial associations by former working royals. Key updates included any commercial deployment of royal-sounding terminology, such as the Crown, Royal Standard, or Windsor Line, by former royals now requires prior approval from the Royal Trust's legal office. All public-facing charitable communications involving royal titles must prominently include a disclaimer stating non-affiliation with the British monarchy. Sources confirm that the Crown's legal advisors have prepared a formal notice of breach addressed to the brand's parent company, challenging Meghan's alleged use of packaging designs that mirror royal stationery and traditional gift-wrapping conventions, particularly in the floral wreath and fruit gift box collections. Global headlines reflected the summit's significance. The Guardian published, and faces the storm, how the princess steered Windsor through the Archewell minefield. The New York Times wrote, IRS clears the Crown, UK royals establish non-entanglement in Markle Foundation probe. French outlet Le Monde ran, Un monarchy sans ambiguïté. The narrative had decisively shifted, from uncertainty regarding royal involvement to the establishment of a fortified institutional firewall, reinforced by diplomacy and internal reform. As the investigation transitions toward potential enforcement, attention now turns to the palace's next steps. Will the Sussex titles face reconsideration? Could additional legal measures follow? In an institution that seldom speaks and almost never acts publicly in moments of controversy, the Princess Royal has set a new standard: cooperation, clarity, and consequence. On the crisp morning of February 18, 2026, less than 48 hours after her private summit with IRS leadership, Princess Anne stepped onto the south lawn of Marlborough House and addressed a semicircle of international press. The setting was restrained, a stone lectern bearing only the insignia of the Royal Trust, flanked by the flags of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. There were no fanfares, no mounted escorts, no ceremonial guards. This was not celebration, it was constitutional duty. Anne's tone was resolute, her language precise. The royal family has neither funded nor endorsed the Archewell Foundation. We have provided no formal or informal affiliation, nor have we authorized the use of our names, titles, or symbols for commercial or philanthropic purposes connected to that entity. She continued, her composure unwavering, when institutions are invoked as shields for private interests, and when language once synonymous with service is repurposed into currency for influence, it becomes our obligation to act not from sentiment but from fidelity to the rule of law and the preservation of public trust. Representatives from the Times to the Washington Post stood momentarily silent. In a single, carefully measured statement, Princess Anne accomplished what months of speculation, debate, and anonymous disclosures had failed to resolve. She spoke with directness, clear, unequivocal, and absent the diplomatic hedging so often characteristic of royal responses. While the royal household had for years maintained internal distance from the Sussexes' private ventures, this marked the first occasion on which that separation was formally codified in a public declaration. And proceeded to outline the three foundational pillars of the monarchy's institutional firewall. 1. Neutrality in non-state ventures. Any former working royal engaged in business or charitable enterprises must include a formal disclaimer clarifying that they do not represent or act on behalf of the monarchy. 2. Prohibition on symbolic replication. No commercial entity may utilize royal emblems, crests, traditional fonts, or historically recognized color schemes associated with the crown unless explicit authorization is granted by the Lord Chamberlain's office. 3. Non-recognition of informal associations. Any explicit or implied assertion that a private organization continues the legacy of the royal family without formal approval will be regarded as misleading and subject to reputational disavowal. Later that day, Anne's office released a 3-page document summarizing these principles under the title, Statement of Institutional Separation, Archewell and the Crown. The summary was circulated to international regulatory bodies, nonprofit registries, and select media institutions. Although Meghan Markle was not mentioned by name during the live address, and remarks in the subsequent private press briefing were notably direct. When a Financial Times correspondent asked whether the palace had ever sanctioned Meghan's repeated use of the Duchess of Sussex title in commercial or philanthropic contexts, and responded firmly, titles granted under the crown are not commercial instruments. They are neither shields for profit nor devices for branding. They are symbolic obligations held in public trust. To deploy such a title in connection with unclear financial operations, particularly amid an active audit, is, at best, irresponsible. At worst, it may prove unlawful. That subtle escalation, from ethical critique to potential legal implication, sent immediate shockwaves through British and American media. Within minutes, Princess Anne, Archewell audit, and institutional separation were trending globally. At the conclusion of the briefing, Anne confirmed that the palace's legal counsel had initiated 2 formal proceedings, review of title authority. A recommendation submitted to the Privy Council to reconsider the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's retention of their titles, contingent upon substantiated evidence of continued misuse. Cease and desist motion against as ever. A formal legal notice delivered to the U.S. registered parent company of Meghan's luxury brand, challenging the use of stylized elements resembling the royal warrant, crown insignia, and Windsor-inspired gift packaging motifs. And underscored that these measures were institutional rather than personal. This is not an act of vengeance, she stated. It is an act of protection. The monarchy cannot serve as a veil beneath which private empires are constructed on myth, sentiment, or misrepresentation. In the hours following her address, other senior royals signaled quiet but unmistakable support. Prince William, during a private engagement at Kensington Palace that afternoon, was quoted by a senior aide as saying, "My aunt has spoken with precision and moral clarity. Our duty is not ambiguous. Only our disappointment is." In a rare public gesture, Queen Camilla dispatched a handwritten note to and via royal courier. Though the contents remain confidential, palace insiders confirmed it included an endorsement of Anne's position and a copied remark from the late Queen Elizabeth II, "Silence is not always wise when the house is misunderstood." Even Prince Edward, often regarded as the most reserved among the Windsor siblings, offered a brief statement to the Telegraph. There is a distinction between stepping back from royal duty and stepping forward with the royal costume still intact. By mid-afternoon, major global publications had released rapid response editorials. The New York Times, "A Royal Reckoning, Princess Anne sets the record straight." The Guardian, "No more shadows, Anne's speech ends the age of royal ambiguity." The Sydney Morning Herald, "From Princess to Prosecutor, Anne speaks for the institution." Politico, "IRS commends Windsor cooperation." All eyes now on Meghan's next move. Though measured in tone, Anne's address delivered one of the most consequential institutional clarifications in modern royal history. It was not merely a declaration, it was a precedent. Palace sources suggest it will now serve as the benchmark for all future disputes involving royal branding, titles, and financial entanglements. As Princess Anne turned and re-entered Marlborough House, the assembled crowd stood motionless, not out of ceremony, but out of recognition. Recognition that something definitive had been stated. And that something final might soon follow. As the reverberations of Anne's February 18 address settled, the implications for Meghan Markle's financial, legal, and reputational trajectory began to take shape. What had originated as a routine internal audit of a charitable organization now appears to be expanding into a broad, multi-agency inquiry, with Meghan increasingly positioned at the center of what analysts describe as a strategic unraveling of credibility. At the heart of the matter are two intertwined threads: allegations of financial irregularities surrounding the Archewell Foundation, claims of commercial misrepresentation connected to the luxury lifestyle brand as ever. Together, they form a portrait of increasingly blurred boundaries between philanthropy, private enrichment, and public perception. Sources close to the matter indicate that the IRS has escalated its posture from a routine compliance review to an active fraud investigation. This shift reportedly followed the voluntary submission of internal emails by Meghan's former executive assistant, communications that referenced charitable packaging for brand optics and a selective transparency strategy. Federal branding and nonprofit compliance officials are now examining whether Archewell functioned as a vehicle for personal tax deferral, allegedly routing lifestyle expenditures such as travel, security, and housing through the nonprofit's operating accounts. Investigators are assessing claims that donors may have been misled through the invocation of royal identity and philanthropic language, while substantial funds were diverted toward administrative overhead and promotional initiatives. The fiscal sponsorship structure adopted in June 2025 is also under scrutiny. According to investigators, the timing of that shift, coinciding with declining donations, may suggest an effort to shield Archewell's finances from deeper examination. Although Prince Harry's name remains on formal documentation, sources allege that Meghan exercised primary managerial authority, including staffing appointments, banking signatory power, and coordination with media partners. One IRS insider, speaking anonymously, summarized the situation starkly: the presentation was curated to appear royal. The documentation reflects private benefits structured as public service. At the same time, Meghan's lifestyle brand, as ever, is confronting mounting intellectual property challenges. Following Princess Anne's address, legal counsel for the Royal Trust submitted a formal cease and desist order to Evermark Collective Incorporated, the Delaware-registered holding company overseeing the brand. The notice demands immediate cessation of all packaging, branding, or marketing elements that reference or visually resemble British royal symbolism, including crown motifs, heraldic typography, royal blue and gold palettes, or Windsor-style crests. Withdrawal of promotional materials linking the Duchess of Sussex title to product launches, cookbooks, or celebrity partnerships. Issuance of a public disclaimer clarifying that as ever is a private enterprise with no affiliation to the royal family, the sovereign grant, or any UK patronage institution. As of February 18, the brand's official website had gone offline for what was described as maintenance. Meanwhile, retailers including Harrods International and Fortnum Mason confirmed to The Telegraph that pending wholesale discussions had been suspended. Financial analysts estimate that more than $23 million in inventory remains unsold, including 137,455 fruit preserve gift boxes, 62,000 monogrammed candles, 44,000 jars of Windsor orange marmalade, 80,000 floral sprinkle sachets, 39,000 peppermint tea tins bearing the phrase, "by royal ritual." The most damaging data point emerged from an IRS-supported forensic audit. Over a 24-hour span between January 30 and 31, 2026, the brand reportedly sold just 26 units, despite running a birthday-themed promotional campaign. In response, warehouse operators in New Jersey and Ontario have allegedly begun declining renewed storage agreements, citing concerns over liquidation risk and delayed payment exposure. Should formal charges proceed, they may fall under Title 26, tax fraud and false reporting, and potentially Title 18, wire fraud statutes. Legal consequences could include civil penalties reaching up to 75% of misreported funds, permanent revocation of Archewell's tax-exempt status, criminal referral to the Department of Justice for concealment of financial intent, discovery proceedings opening private communications, contracts, and financial records to federal review. Observers also highlight potential exposure to UK-based misrepresentation or defamation claims, particularly if products or fundraising activities are proven to have leveraged royal titles contrary to palace directives. Simultaneously, the California Attorney General's office has reopened a dormant file tied to Archewell's 2023 compliance lapse, an early indicator that state-level enforcement could follow. Privately, strain between Harry and Meghan is reportedly intensifying. An anonymous aide close to the Sussex circle told The Times, Harry envisioned Archewell as an honorable extension of his mother's legacy. Meghan envisioned a global lifestyle empire. They compromised somewhere between those visions, and that compromise is where everything unraveled. Reports suggest Harry has declined to authorize further commercial expansions under as ever, while Meghan continues to pursue global product placements and cookbook collaborations linked to their Netflix projects. Some insiders speculate that Harry may seek formal legal separation from Archewell's operational control, potentially insulating himself should charges advance. Public reaction has sharpened on both sides of the Atlantic. British commentators question whether titles under international investigation should continue to command taxpayer respect. In the United States, non-profit watchdog organizations have called for restrictions barring Meghan from directing future tax-exempt entities pending resolution. As princess and anchors the institutional response, Meghan appears increasingly isolated, legally, commercially, and symbolically. The House of Windsor is reinforcing its firewall deliberately, brick by brick. Meanwhile, Meghan's structure of credibility appears increasingly fragile, each disclosure loosening another beam. With the investigation approaching a critical phase, Buckingham Palace is reportedly preparing a Privy Council session to evaluate possible suspension or revocation of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex titles. While no final determination has been issued, insiders indicate that King Charles has given conditional approval to proceed, should legal criteria be satisfied. In parallel, the Royal Trust is drafting a policy initiative, tentatively titled the Civic Clarity Act, aimed at regulating post-royal title usage and preventing future institutional ambiguity. For Meghan, the horizon appears narrowing, escalating legal exposure, mounting commercial instability, and complete royal disengagement offer limited avenues for rehabilitation. Princess Anne's position now defines the Crown's stance: cooperation with lawful authority, zero tolerance for symbolic exploitation, and an unmistakable message: the Crown is not a commodity. And no individual, duchess or otherwise, stands above its duty.